Hello, everyone. I'm Jade with HiveNation. HiveNation is an SAP marketplace built for consultants by consultants. We're here to help every independent SAP consultant like yourself to not only find your next project, but also help you to grow your income, your skills, and your network. On this show, we bring in the world's experts to discuss everything from how to implement the latest trends in SAP and technology into your everyday operations to helping you take your career in SAP to the next level. Check us out and join today at hivenation.com. So, welcome everyone to another episode on Hive Nation. Today on our show, we are going to take a look at a more broad view in technology and discuss technology strategy and trends that are affecting all IT organizations and specifically how they deliver value to the enterprise. So today we have an incredible guest. He's an independent technology advisor with over 20 years of experience in technology management and has been a tech entrepreneur for the last 6 years. Previously, he had corporate roles with Sony PlayStation and Clorox in enterprise architecture, information security, and business transformation. He started his career with Deloitte Consulting, where he spent over 14 years implementing solutions in the SAP ecosystem for Fortune 500 companies across all industries and around the world. He is also one of HiveNation's expert community leaders in the field of technology strategy and trends, where he teaches how to implement the latest technologies into your everyday operations. So please welcome Manny Bargiela. Thank you, Manny, for joining us today.
Thank you, Jade. Happy to be here.
Also joining us today is our very own HiveNation co-founder, Steve Brooks. He has been providing SAP strategy, transformation, and implementation services to clients for over 20 years. So thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Jade.
So to dive right into it, technology is kind of a wide topic here. So in your experience, what have been some of the areas you've been focusing on in technology that you're personally very passionate about?
Yes, my focus has been in technology strategy, enterprise architecture, and program management. Although I started my career delivering SAP solutions, over time, as I worked across many industries, business processes, and value streams, I had to become platform agnostic. So my passion is about how to incorporate, leverage, operate innovation and technology in the business to create new capabilities and deliver measurable value in the most effective and efficient way. Enterprise architecture specifically has been a critical foundation to get into IT strategy. But overall, I do like the term technology management as a concept.
Right. So you really focus on, the high level areas of technology, such as, management and strategy.
Exactly. It's really about how to incorporate new technologies, and we'll talk about it in a minute. How to incorporate it, how does that change how IT delivers value to the business, value to the customers, value to the client? How do we do that? There's really on the operations of IT and technology and the management of it, then really in the vertical side of individual platforms.
So with the explosion of technological products, everywhere really, what have been some of the major shifts that you've experienced in the domain of management of those technologies?
So when you talk about this technological explosion, is really what we're talking about innovations of cloud computing, mobility, interconnectivity in general, analytics, and of course, lately, all the emergent techs like artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, robotization, automation. Those are all new technologies that somehow every corporation has to have to consider and understand how they can incorporate and leverage to create value. Now, from a technology management point of view, like really on the management perspective side, I'm going to point out two shifts that I think are worth mentioning here. The first one is called the bimodal IT model, and the other one is talking a little bit about flexible consumption models. So first, on the bimodal IT, what is it? What it is something that was defined by Gartner, the consulting firm, the advisory firm, as a hybrid model of operating in IT. Because given the fact that you have to deal with all these new innovation and disruptive technologies, you still have to continue to run your business. So you have to create an IT that on one side, on one mode of operating, focuses on low uncertainty, predictable type of activities, basically run your business efficiently and effectively. So we still need to do that. But at the same time, you need to also develop a mode of work focused more on exploring, experimenting with new technologies, disruptive things, and taking risks and accepting failure, but do it quickly so that you're minimizing the cost of that failure. So IT, the bimodal IT concept is how do you build an IT organization that basically serves both purposes, the traditional running, but also the innovative.
That can apply, not just to technical standards and procedures as well, but even with your employees. How do you foster that creativity?
Absolutely. So the whole thing is like we talk about IT and technology in this case, but everything that we're going to mention here actually applies to the entire enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
The entire enterprise in the sense that also the enterprise has to say, oh, we have a traditional product or services that we deliver. How do we create new novel products that customers are going to want to consume or buy? So again, you have to run your normal day-to-day jobs efficiently and effectively, but also take risk and innovate in new places, in new things that you really don't know and you cannot predict what actually is going to come out of it. But you have to do that kind of experimentation so that it prepares yourself for these new eventualities of what's happening. And when we're talking about disruptive innovation, but over the last 2 years, we also had, social changes, that I think impacted at companies. How many companies had to decide to have a remote working operating model, right? Where people are working from home. If you're not ready to do that, you suffered the last 2 years. You really suffered. And if you suffered as an enterprise, your employees suffered,
Mm-hmm.
and your customers suffered. So it's like, how do you get ahead of the curve? That's really the key. How do you get it ahead of the curve? By, again, continuing to deliver what you do well and continue to do it effectively, but also how to do the other way, which is innovating, risk-taking, be a startup, kind of the startup mentality inside the corporation.
Right. And you see companies like Google do that where, they build out how many hundreds of products that never see light of day
Right.
to come up with one thing that will just kill it in the market. How do you as a company really kind of bake that into your models? So
Yeah.
are there some standards or frameworks on how to reorganize IT in a bimodal manner?
So yes, they are models. So what we're talking about, the concept that we're talking about is IT operating model. So what's the domain that we're talking about? So as a reference, models that people recognize is the plan, build, and run model. That's what people use. A lot of companies use that. They organize that way, and basically just tells you like how IT operates and creates technology and capability, right? So traditional ways like you plan them, you design them, you build them, you test them, you deploy them, and then you operate them on a day-to-day basis. That's a traditional way that has been working. So the plan, build, run model works from that level, but it has some challenges, like it lacks in agility. It's difficult sometimes to adapt or to incorporate new input or new information and basically pivot into new ideas. It's very hard in that model to do that. It's hard to find a place in the plan, build, run model or where you do experimentation, right? Where do you do that? Also, failure in a model like that, because of the sequential aspect of the model, failure is expensive. And you don't want to take too many risks because, if you're on a 2-year project, you want to fail in the middle. That would be too costly. So the challenges of the plan, build, run model can be actually fixed with new models. So there are new models out there that actually are way more adapted at managing disruptive innovation and incorporating it into how IT works and literally transforming IT. And when I say IT, like I said before, this could apply to the entire enterprise. But for now, I'm going to focus on the IT functions, right? So the model that I'm talking about is called the run, grow, transform. We should move from a plan, build, run to a run, grow, transform. And basically create IT, make IT into a capabilities and value factory. I really like that concept of factory, capabilities and value factory. Now, what is run, grow, and transform? Well, that's really actually the objectives of what IT should accomplish when you really think about it. Those are goals, those are objectives. So first objective is to run. And the goal here is to have consistent, high quality services with operational efficiency, low cost, but also low risk tolerance. That's the run. So that's why we were saying the day-to-day operations have to work very well, right? No risk, it works well. Then some of those, you have the grow component of the goal of IT, which is really to improve the top line revenue by improving and innovating existing, and that's the key term, existing products, services, markets, or business models. That's always when we talk about what we're touching is product, service, market, and business models. The transform component, the last component of the run, grow, transform, the objective there is for radical innovation. to create new, novel products, services, markets, and business models. So the difference is this, is that run is the day-to-day operations that we do done efficiently and effectively. Grow is about taking those existing products, services, and models or processes and improving them continuously. Mm-hmm. And then you have a transform component and goal of IT, which is really to create absolutely new things that basically don't exist today. And that could go from, like I said, a new product, a new service line, it could be a new market, and it could be a completely new business model. Like I said before, you could say that certain companies might need to create or work closer with startups to get that innovation pool inside the company and integrate it into the whole idea of IT and technology management. Now, the other word that is very important here is the word of digital transformation that has been used in the market a lot. There is challenges in the digital transformation to incorporate it in the traditional plan, build, and run model. Where does it fit? Mm-hmm. Where does it fit around? In the run, grow, transform model, well, obviously, there is a specific goal that is specifically defined as being to cover the needs of digital transformation. And so by having that component and really a focus into transformation, you have a better approach into your IT operating model to incorporate these new technologies on governance of that, financial management, and even, of course, resources and our management, because you're going to operate the transform activities differently than your run and grow activities. Big topic. We probably will have to deep dive.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting topic to be able to actually tack on a whole new business model or transform into an entirely new market, without a loss of revenue there. And so when we delve into this a little bit more, as you said in a webinar, because I believe you have covered this topic ad nauseum in depth too.
Yes. Again, we're deep diving it because there are certain things one is to understand the target, which is to be a run, grow, and transform organization. But much more important is how do you transition into it? This is not an easy, quick thing. So the transitioning means that you have to start in a siloed way on doing some of these operating model changes in a siloed way, but then expand it into other areas where then it becomes kind of natural, kind of native for the companies to operate in that way. Again, the different companies at different maturity levels. If you take like the native digital companies, like, the Google, Facebook, Twitters of the world, they're already operating in a much more run, grow, transform model naturally, right? Just because of the nature of that product and how they were built. But if you take a lot, and the majority of the non-IT companies or the non-native digital companies that are trying to innovate, those are the ones, that I'm really more talking about, which how they're going to transform themselves on how they operate to become the new Google, Facebooks, and Twitters of the world. So one thing that I think would be important is, like, Steve, maybe you can chime in from your experience into delivering consulting services. But what have you seen yourself as some of the maybe limitations or reactions to the plan, build, and run versus the run, grow, and transform?
Yeah, I think, as you pointed out, from a consulting standpoint, I think we see most traditional companies that are running ERP systems, all of their execution and planning processes are really built around plan, build, run. It was the new operating model 10 years ago, and companies have evolved over time to really, number one, make decisions that way, and number two, execute that way, which is really in a sequential manner. And most organizations are working with 3-year plans. So what they're delivering today were initiatives that they started 3 years ago. So to, make a shift in a large, complex organization to something that's more innovative and transformational is very difficult. But I think one of the trends that we tend to see is IT organizations, and not just IT, but IT in partnership with the business, are developing innovation teams. As you mentioned, Manny, they tend to be fairly small, but they focus on that real partnership of technology and business to come up with new solutions quickly, to get those deployed, and then to really try to expand that approach out into other things they do. But, one of the big challenges, obviously, is what you pointed out in the current plan, build, run model that most companies run, there really is no step in there for innovation. So it really needs to be, in a lot of cases, a parallel activity that you need to start and then evolve over time.
And I would even add something interesting here in that transition to move from one model to the other one is the whole concept that you don't need to do all at once. That's very important. And something that you can leverage is, we always talk about how IT is siloed, right? We always hear that IT is siloed, where you have like the infrastructure people, they don't want to talk to the apps people, they don't want to talk to the social media people. They're kind of in different areas. The digital marketing people have no idea who's managing the ERP. It's really siloed, and decisions are taken in a silo way. Well, instead of looking at that as a challenge, maybe it can become an opportunity. Because what that means is that you could actually, if you are siloed, you could take some of these silos and transform them independently to some extent of the other silos, just to practice, this new way of working, right? So you do that. So you're already creating your bimodal way organizationally, where you have some functions that are going to be working in the ground grown model because they're more adapted to it, or you have the right skills there, or the financing are a little bit more flexible, whatever it is. You do it there, you practice it there, and as that becomes more and more successful, you will expand it to the next silos. And then by creating the next silo using the same model, where you should try to build at those bridges and then eliminate that silo. Because the run, grow, and transform, again, as I mentioned before, yes, we're talking in a concept of technology, but it applies to the entire company. The entire corporation has to become a run, grow, and transform model. But we can use, actually, to transition to that, we can definitely leverage to some extent the negativity of working in silos that we always hear over the last many years.
I like that idea too, Manny, of taking it one step at a time and seeing how it works and how efficiently that transition can become, and then just implementing that throughout other areas of the company.
And to be clear, when we're talking about what needs to be changed, we're talking about governance. We're talking about your vendor management. We're talking about your strategic partnerships. We're talking about financial management. We're talking about performance management. We're talking about your technology stack, obviously, right? There are certain things like, trying to do agile projects on a standard ERP solution. Good luck, right? I mean, everything has its place. Everything has its place, right? But I think it's important to embrace it for the entire company. It's a new way of operating for the entire company. And I think that's where IT as a function can take a different role of more leading the business instead of, how traditional the business has led IT. So IT has to become a business. And by doing that, leads me to some extent to that second big trend, besides the bimodal IT and having to change your operating model. I'd like to mention the transition of a lot of companies and the environment into the on-demand flexible consumption model, right? So what is that? What is the thing is that the as a service. What does that mean, right? It's a complicated word, of course, right? Architects, we like complicated words. It's a service as a model. So we all know like software as a service. We all know platform as a service. But this has expanded to extreme levels where now you have BI analytics as a service. We even have security authentication as a service. We have functions, entire functions as a service, where you can completely, buy a finance department and have a finance department deliver your goods, deliver your services, right? You even have an IT as a service nowadays. So what we live with that all the time, the subscription model, that's more of a consumer aspect of this. We live with that all the time. We take it for granted. We have to consider, though, that changes fundamentally how technology needs to be managed, right? So if I take one example of it that I think is very telling, is on people and skills, right? So in a traditional IT, how it used to be is that you had IT professionals that were expert and specialists in one specific platform that used to configure and admin their own platforms. Well, now we're asking them in this kind of on-demand flexible consumption model environment to manage vendors and service level agreements. Well, that's quite a different job than from managing your platform and configure your platform or write code. Now, suddenly you have to write SLAs. It's a different type of skill. So skills are changing because of this. And here's a crazy statistic, I think. So Gartner Talent did a survey, and this is what they come up with. They said that 33% of the skills needed 3 years ago, okay, so 1/3 of the skills needed 3 years ago are no longer relevant.
Wow, in just 3 years.
So that tells you that we are not just going fast in innovation, we're actually accelerating, right? Where maybe 10 years ago, you had to refresh your skills every 10 years. Now it seems that we have to refresh our skills, at least a third of it, in 3 years. What is it going to be in the next 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to get not just into a continuous improvement model for the corporation, you have to go into a continuous learning model
Mm-hmm.
for the people. You have to. That's the only way. Otherwise, you're going to be obsolete very quickly, right?
Right.
So I think it's important to understand that the bimodal, the run, grow, transform, the digital transformation, the on-demand access a service, all that trickles down to a change needed in the skills and the resources that people have. So, Steve, do you see that in your operations? You know, how do you see the same thing? Do you see the skills needing to evolve?
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, especially in the SAP market, many functional and technical consultants traditionally were very siloed around their particular modules or capabilities configuring within SAP. And as SAP, as an example, as a product has grown, rather than continuing to build, they've acquired other SaaS solutions to integrate into their overall offering. And so, you can look at things like Concur Travel and Expense as an example. That's now SAP's travel and expense capability. And, you no longer have to configure as a consultant. Concur, the SaaS provider, provides those configuration skills. And so now what clients are looking for are consultants that understand the process, understand the configuration in order to be able to help guide the SaaS provider or Concur in this case. And then really to, hold them accountable for delivery and also to work closely with the business to design and deploy the solution. So the skills have really evolved from hands-on configuration work to more project management, communication, leadership skills that consultants need to have. So to your point, as you see technology and you see operating models transform, consultants need to really stay ahead of the curve. And, currently in the future, I think it's more focused on integration, communication, and leadership skills.
HiveNation is a community of consultants. So how do you see this new type of management impacting independent consultants and helping them with their current and future clients?
As a consultant and an independent consultant, what consultants need to focus on really is making sure that you have the basic skills and understanding in the areas of technology that you support, but to really build your overall business process knowledge. And I think build, like I mentioned, your communication, your integration skills. It's no longer just being able to focus on one particular module, but you may need to become more of an expert in middleware in order to build communication between the SaaS solution and your ERP system. And then really a focus and understanding on how to deploy solutions. So understanding how and being able to guide clients on how to plan out their deployments, how to actually train end users and provide that level of support. So as consultants, people really need to focus on those areas. And within HiveNation, that's exactly what we're trying to support. Really having consultants be able to build their skills and capabilities and evolve them quickly. Like Manny had mentioned earlier, most of the skills that were relevant 3 years ago are now outdated. And being an independent consultant, you're typically, you're as good as your last implementation. So if you've been with a client for, say, 5 years, which in some cases isn't uncommon, there's an entire evolution of software and capabilities and management that may have passed by you, and it's difficult to catch up, unless you happen to be lucky and be staffed on a project where somebody, may have moved to implement Concur, for example, like I'd mentioned. So it's very important that consultants stay current and have an opportunity to learn and build those skills independent of the projects that they're on, because that's what's going to keep you marketable.
I guess that would also be a whole separate topic then, Steve, is when do you find the time to kind of stay with continual education? Manny, I believe you have almost a different perspective on the client side.
Well, it's more that when we're talking about how is these trends in technology management affecting the community of consultants, I'm going to take the other. So Steve talked about the point of view from the consultant side. I'm going to take the point of view of the client side, having been a client myself and walked through shoes and consuming. I was a consumer of consulting services, right? So as clients, what do you want in this kind of fast accelerating model, right? Transform, innovate, accelerate. Well, what you want is a quick access to specific skills on demand, right? So that's really what you want. It's a whole skills as a service kind of model, right? We were talking about the as a service model, the flexible consumption models. It applies to skills and resources as well. So these skills have to be accessible. You have to have access to a broad range of skill sets of traditional IT skills as well as the new world IT skills. You have to be flexible. You have to be agile, scalable to what I need. So it's really the on-demand model, right? It's being able that the customer, which I am, is able to access, consume, and pay services on a need and usage basis. It applies to skills as well. And so I think that, creating any type of platform, to incorporate, this type of resource management and how to incorporate these new sources, right? We traditionally work with our team. If you have a good organization, you work across multiple teams. And then you probably work with some one or two consultant firms, right? And you probably have one or two suppliers, right? Or then some strategic partners. And then you also have these independent experts that you need on point for certain specific things. How do you make that all work, right? So resource management becomes very important for a company, and they need to take into consideration these skill sets on demand as a service to really promote basically what I call the P2P economy, right? It's the many-to-many relationships, right? A client has a specific need, it's very unique. How is he going to find that resource? Yes, he could go to a traditional consulting firm and do that, or he could go to a platform where actually he can look for the skills he wants and then pick them, click on it, and then decide the price, decide the duration,
Right.
and get started.
Right. And that's exactly how this platform, HiveNation, is unique, is it is almost like a skills as a service model.
And I think for the client, that's really what you want, is having that flexibility that I can get the resource when I want, where I want, for the price I want, for the duration I want. And when I'm unfortunately done with it, I move on to the next one.
Exactly. It's like a la carte.
A la carte, exactly. And I think it's important because, again, above all, and it doesn't matter if you're in the traditional plan, build, run model and the new run, grow, transform model. It doesn't really matter. Although in the run, grow, transform model, because you do have that component of transforming as a big goal into your company, well, to transform, you need novel ideas, right? Now, yes, your novel ideas might come from your own people, but sometimes, to deploy something, you need such specific skills or somebody who has an experience that is so unique. How do you get access to that person? How do you get in touch with that person? How do you know even that person exists, right? And then even the whole more recruiting side of it, right? Is like, how do you buy those resources, right? It's not just about consuming. How do you buy them? How do you pay for them? How do you plan for them even, right? How do you plan for those type of finances? And that goes back into like the financial models that I use in plan, build, and run don't work in the other model, because when you create a model where experimentation and exploration is key, it's very hard to plan the finances for that. Kind of defeats the purposes, right?
Right. I mean, unless you're building out like a whole R&D, which I'm not sure.
But that's a little bit what it is. I actually even was joking one day. It's like you don't need a bi-modal IT. You actually need a tri-modal IT, right? So you have your traditional IT. You have what we're talking about, the transformation. And for me, there should be a branch of IT whose only purpose is to do open innovation, which is basically looking at startup universities, colleges all around the world that have ideas, and just look at that and be ready for that, be aware of the strengths, and then slowly kind of put it into the pipeline, into the transform, and then they can play with it and try to see what comes out of it. And when something comes good and really creates value for the customer and for the company, how do we bring it back into the run? And that, then you go back into your circle. So it becomes a run, which then you try to grow and innovate by itself. And in parallel, again, you have the outside in kind of innovation coming in to the transform component. And that's how you do it. But again, how do you build an organization? How you transition to an organization like that? That's the key.
I mean, how do you basically have like these startup incubators become like an R&D as a service?
Correct. Absolutely. So that's the world we're going in. Nothing has been defined. Everything is for us to define. So that's what's great too, right? So we have to make it work. And again, in 3 years, it will change anyway. So
Right. Well, thank you, Manny, for your time and really kind of delving into where we're going as technology and specifically technology management. Do you have any last words to leave our consultants or main takeaway?
yeah, so we talk high level, of course, about IT operating models and how IT should work with these new technologies and these new ways of consuming technology, right? So we talked about all that. So you might wonder, well, okay, so what does knowing that matter to independent consultants, right? To clients, we understand the need for the clients to understand that. That's kind of the core of their job, right? To come up with those solutions. But for independent consultants, why is this important to know? Well, because understanding how IT operates helps the consultant understand how decisions are made. And if you know how decisions are made, you can better influence them. So it really helps, the consultant influence decisions by understanding how those decisions are being made. But also beyond that, at a more personal level, as companies continue to transform their operating model, their skill sets, their platforms, and that's just going to continue. And as I said before, accelerate. So if we feel it's fast now, it's going to get faster. So for consultants, they need to understand how they fit into these models. They need to understand, because if we talk about continuous learning what? So you want to learn a skill that is going to be a hard skill now and in the next 3 years. And knowing that in the next 3 years, you already have to have the next skills to cover you for the next 3 years. So I think understanding how IT operates ultimately is very important to know how you fit into that entire model.
Well said. Well said. Thank you, Manny. And I think, in our upcoming episodes, it's how to really, one, set aside time to learn those skills, and two, exactly what you said, what are those skills?
Yes, very important. And again, I think that talent management, again, that's a topic that's very hard here because, again, the traditional models of doing talent management just don't work. You just don't get the right resources, right? So there is really a challenge. Look, I work a lot, a little bit on a side note, I do a lot of work in the decentralized economy. And if you see how these people operate, it has absolutely nothing to do on how traditional corporations work. Absolutely not. So, and that's where we're going. So better learn sooner rather than later how these models are going to affect each individual capacity to work and capacity to deliver value, because ultimately that's what we're here for.
Well, thank you, Manny. Thank you again so much for joining us this morning. And Steve, thank you as well for your SAP input. And thank you to everyone for listening. As we had mentioned, Manny will be delving more into this topic in his upcoming webinar, so please check it out in our HiveNation community on the app or at community.hivenation.com. Also, our next show will be announced on both our site, hivenation.com, and in our community app. You can download the app today to stay up to date with the latest SAP trends, learn new practical solutions, and network with SAP experts. Like Manny, reach out to him directly through the app. Feel free to send us any questions or requests to community@hivenation.com. Until next time, this is Jade with HiveNation, a platform built for SAP consultants by consultants.